Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars, and I am just thrilled to introduce today's guest. It is my dear, dear friend, Steve Huse. Steve Huse, and I've got to mention his wife, Lila, even though she won't be on the film, but you cannot talk to Steve without hearing about Lila. So now I said it. Steve is not the founder, but he bought a very rundown steakhouse in Indianapolis called St. Elmo's. Now, if you look, it's a top 10 steakhouse in the United States. He took a pizza chain public. He owned, God knows, 30, 40 Arby's. He was president of Steak and Shake. You're like, what's this got to do with cars? Steve was a client of mine. Steve flew with us to Pebble Beach and Detroit Auto Show and Amelia Island and Barrett-Jackson and continued to go to all of these places without me. Became a good friend of the family. My dad just loved him. So I really wanted to share him with you. He's got a half a dozen exotics in his garage right now, and you won't meet a more positive, upbeat guy than Steve. Enjoy. Please leave some comments below and subscribe so you know what's coming up.
We have a bottle from 1902, a Chateau Lafite Rothschild, and you can't buy that bottle. You have to buy the whole restaurant to get that bottle. So I also started a pizza chain, and I took it up to about 130 stores and took it public on NASDAQ. And I ran Steak and Shakes, about 300 stores that time, located all over the Midwest and down through Texas. And that was a good company at the time. We took it. I ended up moving it from NASDAQ to the New York Stock Exchange, and that was very, very profitable. People forget price of something if it's a great price value. I mean, they remember the value. Is the value the taste? Is it the size? Is it the service? I lived in a little condominium I'd rented, and it had no furniture on it. They're darn near dead. On 2 occasions, they called Lila and said I was not going to make it. I thought it was kind of dangerous, still do. I look back on that one and think, why did I ever do that? Because a mid-air collision is about as fatal as it can be.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't share with the passengers what you were thinking about. To us, it was just like, hey, we're here. So
yeah. Well, you couldn't see the pucker on my touche.
Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
Connected Through Cars with my good friend, dear old client, fellow car nut, gearhead, Steve Huse. How you doing, Steve?
Good morning.
Steve, you and I met, I think, at Sarasota Winefest at Longboat Key when I probably had a car display of a few odd new and used Rolls, Bentley, something like that on the putting green. Am I fantasizing, or is that how you remember it?
Good memory, Jeff. I do remember it. So does Lila. That was a fun day.
That was. But I don't remember. I don't know. I think somebody introduced us, and I think what got us started is you had a Jag that you were thinking of selling. So whatever it was, I can tell you that whatever I told you I thought it was worth, you told me it wasn't enough.
That's right. XK 140.
That's how we met, through you asking me about selling or what's it worth or something, the XK 140, and it wasn't enough, and the relationship didn't crumble there.
No, it didn't. Thank goodness. You've been a friend for a long time, Jeff. 19 years roughly.
We've been to quite a few events together.
We have. You invited me to go to Pebble Beach for the first time, and that was an exciting time. I don't remember the year, but I'd never been there, and I've been back every year since, except when they canceled it, which was last year.
So you've been to easily, 15 of them or something?
At least.
Wow. Unbelievable. And I think we've been, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I could be blending some events, but you are very active in our gang of exotic car friends. Did we go to Barrett-Jackson together?
We have.
And Amelia Island?
We have.
Was it you that flew us to Amelia Island?
It must have been.
Was it pouring out and freezing out when we flew and we had to run in and buy raincoats or jackets?
You know, Jeff, you've got such a great memory. I don't. I just remember the fun time we've always had going to any car event, any place in the world. I've been to Monaco. I've been all over F1 races, etc. But I try and forget the bad and remember the good.
Well, so for the listening audience, I know Steve personally. So my guests are people that I know. And when Steve says, oh, I try to forget the bad and remember the good, some people come through with a little bit of cliche, but my entire time knowing Steve, that really seems to be how you operate.
Well, I think my mind isn't large enough to remember the bad. I just try and cram it full of the good. I've got the capacity for that.
Limited disk space, you're deciding what goes in there. That's beautiful. So if you don't mind, Steve, walk me through some of the events you've been to, because I've not been to Actually, I have been to Monaco, but not the race. So where have you been?
We've been to the Ferrari factory in Italy, and I got a VIP tour through my friend, Herb Fischel, who used to be in charge of racing for General Motors. He got us the insider's view, and that was really, really fun.
So, Steve, for the listener or the watcher, whether they're listening on audio or watching this on YouTube, that's not been to Modena, can you describe a little bit your Ferrari VIP tour?
One thing that surprised me is I expected to walk into a shop where they were still hammering metal. And once we got inside, it was symphonic music was playing on the PA system with good speakers. So the quality was like having a symphony there. There was grass on the inside of the plant. There were skylights up above. And the thing was mechanized to the point that there were not that many humans making the Ferrari, substantially complete by robotic machines. And
you remember around when this was?
Oh, a couple years ago. So it would have been, this is 2021 coming up. And so it would have been about 2019.
Well, Steve, it's interesting that you mentioned that it's all or mainly robotic build at the Ferrari plant, because there was a time when it was really a hand-built car. And I remember when I was dealing heavily in them, early 2000s, and of course the cars would be that era back, they'd come in with overspray on headlights, overspray on VIN plates, brand new with no miles. So you knew it was a guy in a paint shop. I mean, even though the paint was unbelievably beautiful on the car.
Yes.
It was a guy painting, a person painting.
Not anymore. It's all robotic.
So what else happened there? Anything memorable?
The food, people, the people in plant obviously were quite intelligent. They had to use all these robotic devices, program them and check them and run with them. So they were fun to talk to. The place was so immaculately clean. You could eat off the floor. The average guy can't go through the plant. They have these buses that go through the grounds of the Ferrari factory, but you don't get inside. So we were very blessed to be able to do that.
Steve Huse, founder of St. Elmo's Steakhouse in Indianapolis. Is this a top 10 steakhouse?
Hang on, Jeff, back up. I'm not the founder. I bought it in 1986, and it was founded by a guy that opened a tavern, really, called Joe Starr. And it was Joe Starr's Tavern, and it became St. Elmo's Steakhouse roughly during Prohibition, when they couldn't sell booze, but they could sell steaks. And they did sell booze, but it was all in coffee cups. So it appeared you were having your after-dinner coffee when in fact you were drinking whiskey.
And what did you do with St. Elmo's? Because I think the size and capacity and volume and notoriety changed after you took ownership. Yes?
It did, Jeff. When I bought it in 1986, it was a ratty building, and it just looked awful. They had linoleum tile on the floor. They had some orange vinyl-clad seats. I mean, it looked like a Ma and Pa cafe in the Tuileries. But they did good business, and their steaks were famous, and their drinks were generous. And that attracted a real crowd. That was in one building that was built in 1871. However, there were two buildings adjoining it that were built in roughly that same time period that I ended up buying at auction. My wife, Lila, went down to the place where the auction was held and stood there all day long with all these certified checks. And I ended up paying a little less than $1 million for the remaining two buildings. But since then, we've had to put in about $6 million to literally rebuild them from the inside out and the outside in. Structurally, they were not good, and obviously they weren't level even. And the floors in all three buildings, even though you had floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, they were about 2 to 4 feet difference in where the floors were per building. So we had to integrate all this into St. Elmo, which took a period of several years of construction at about $6 million. And when I bought the restaurant, it did about $3 million. And now it does somewhat over $20 million. It's just a Wonderful place. It seats 500 guests, and you don't feel like you're in a big room because the restaurant's comprised of lots of smaller rooms. So you feel like it's a much more quaint and intimate place than you would think by thinking it serves. There's some nights we serve well over 1,000 meals, and I hate to think how many drinks, 2,000 or 3,000 drinks in a night. And we have a wine cellar, by the way, of about. Right now, we probably have 8,000 or 9,000 bottles in stock, but it's been as high as 16,000 bottles. And when the Formula One guys come to town, we buy all and stock in all the good French wines and wines, Spanish wines, New Zealand wines, Australian wines, Italian wines, you name it, we've got it for them. And they bought a lot of wine.
Steve, speaking of wine, I know this is people we know through cars. Of course, you're an unbelievably interesting guy and you got a great story. In this wine cellar at St. Elmo's, that when you're at capacity, you have more like 15 or 16,000 bottles. And you mentioned French wines, New Zealand wines, etc. But do you do anything with like antique? Do you ever get like, the bottle of something they had while they were signing the Declaration of Independence or something like that?
No, but we have a bottle from 1902, a Chateau Lafite Rothschild, and you can't buy that bottle. You have to buy the whole restaurant to get that bottle. And I'm sure the wine's not good anymore. After all these years, well over 100 years, it's always been stored correctly, at least when I've had it. But I can't tell you how it was stored in the old days. Probably not very well.
What's it worth?
Oh, it's worth multiple millions of dollars if you buy the restaurant. It's more symbolic than it is worth the money to drink the wine. I think it's probably vinegar by now.
Got it. So we don't think that it's good wine in there, but if a bottle like that made it to an auction, it feasibly could be a multi-million-dollar bottle.
I have no idea, Jeff. I don't think wines like that make it to too many auctions. Most of them aren't around anymore. The bottles have long disappeared. We may have the only one. What's
an expensive bottle that a guest comes in and can actually order or actually does order and drink, or an expensive glass of?
We have some bottles at $2,000 to $3,000. We have other bottles less than 50. So we have it for anyone that has the taste for what they want. We probably have it, or something nearby. When I say nearby, one that tastes similar that we can sell them or provide for dinner. We have good wines by the glass, and that's always been a positive thing. A person can come in and say is driving home, have a glass of wine or a shrimp cocktail as an appetizer, and going home and join his family for dinner, and not be driving while intoxicated. Just have a good sip of wine. So we're a generous pour on wine and drinks too. Don't use jiggers to measure out anything. We do it by eyesight. And our bartenders are fairly heavy-handed. That's all right.
Do people actually ever buy a $2,000 or $3,000 bottle?
Absolutely. Happens not every day, but it certainly happens every week.
Mind-boggling to me.
Sometimes more than once a week. I mean, sometimes they're buying 2 or 3 bottles, buy $10,000 worth or more for some special occasion.
So going back when you bought St. Elmo's, this was 1986. And prior to that, what were you doing in the business?
I've been in the restaurant business by accident all my life, Jeff, all my adult life anyway. I started out, I worked for a corporation and traveled for the corporation after college graduation from Indiana University. I traveled every week, Monday through Friday, and I only saw my family on Saturday, Sunday, then back out again. And I thought, this just can't keep going on. We had 1 child and then 2. This wasn't fair for the family. So I ended up buying an Arby's in Bloomington, Indiana, where I'd gone to Indiana University in 1967. Graduated in 1965 from the School of Business. And in fact, went back and taught there a little bit later, just as a guest lecturer. But bought an Arby's, took that up to 34 before I sold that. And I just sold it, by the way, a year and a half ago. So that was over 50 years of running a chain of Arby's. In the meantime, I had other restaurants too that I had started. Some I sold. We had 2 or 3 failures, wrong location, wrong concept. And sometimes you just have to, if it's not going to go, it's better to close it and pay off your bankers and pay your employees for an extra month or whatever we did at that time, probably at least a month, and get out of that business and liquidate it or turn it into a different use. One restaurant we made into a bank, and they were my tenant for 30 years. So we tried to cover by owning real estate as much as we can. So if something didn't go well, we could convert it to a different use and become a landlord. And that philosophy turned out to be a saving grace several times.
We traveled probably, I want to say Pebble Beach, because I think that we went to In-N-Out Burger.
We did.
Yep, with my father, my late father.
Dad was a great guy. That's why you turned out so well, Jeff.
Oh, thank you. And I'm happy to give him the credit. My dad was a great guy, no doubt. And I do remember you taking the whichever In-N-Out Burger out to the trunk of your car, and you got out a little ruler and you took pictures of it. Do you remember that?
I do. And I also had a little scale with it, and I weighed it too. I wanted the cooked weight of it.
That was amazing to me, how scrutinous. I just love their hamburger. But I remember that you were telling my dad about your Arby's business and that it was as much of a real estate play as it was about profitability of the business.
Well, believe profitability does count. You got to make your payments, got to pay your employees, got to pay your taxes, et cetera. So, and earn a living. You want to employ your money so it does make you money. The restaurant business is not an easy business. You're open 7 days a week and about 15, 16 hours a day. And we had a lot of people start with us that have gone on to great success, and they owe that to the training they got in our company. And doctors, lawyers, other restaurateurs, et cetera. What I did when we were able to buy restaurant locations and build our own building, I would put that in. I had a family limited partnership, and I put that in my 3 children's name. Each child got 33%, I got 1%, but I had the only voting stock of 1%. And that way I was able to control the money and make sure it went for only good things and not bad. When you're young, sometimes you make bad decisions. Although luckily none of my kids ever did. I never had to bail them out of any problem at all. They all turned out to be great kids. But I wanted that control. I think that's real important. I tend to be a control guy anyway.
Steve, I didn't want to tell you that was my only beef with you as your friend, is just what a control freak you were. No, I never experienced that with you. I never experienced that with you.
You're uncontrollable. You're uncontrollable anyway.
As every teacher told my father many times a year.
Cool. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, you turned out fine, didn't you?
Well, as long as you think so.
I like to look back now at some of my teachers that probably thought I was a real below average guy. And I think mostly I was so bored, in particularly grade school, just bored to pieces, that my behavior wasn't always good. I wasn't a bad guy. I just tended to be sometimes outspoken and full pranks and that type of thing. So I'd like to go back and illustrate to those nuns that I had at St. Joan of Arc that actually did turn out all right.
Well, Steve, it's funny you mentioned that. Over the years, being in the retail business, obviously I've met hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, sometimes I meet hundreds of people in a month. I mean, financial success is certainly not the only measure of success, and it's definitely not the only measure of success with you. But certainly I've run into a lot of people with the ability to buy what I was selling, which could be this new kind of car, whether it be Cadillac or whether it be Landrover or whether it be exotic car or BMW or whatever. And I cannot tell you how many of them let me know how below average student, how surprised they were that they could do this now. That's a good way to put it. I've heard it so many times, I could probably write a book about that I was such a terrible student. There's probably not one teacher that thinks that I wouldn't be living in a cardboard box.
I've always said the A students become doctors, the B students become lawyers, and the C students hire both of those professions.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say that. And that's just that's a generality. That's a great saying. And that's encouraging to young people today. They don't need to throw in the towel just because school's a struggle or boring or whatever. Many entrepreneurs come out of struggling in school. So when were you with Steak and Shake? Because I mean, my God, 34 Arby's, St. Elmo since 86. When were you with Steak and Shake? We forgot Noble Romans. I also started a pizza chain, and I took it up to about 130 stores and took it public on NASDAQ right after Arby's. And then I had Mustard's, which was another upscale casual restaurant, a little bit. It was a lot successful, actually, in Bloomington. And then Steak and Shake, let me think, Jeff, that had to be in about maybe 89, 90, 91. And I was hired to come in as a turnaround guy. I worked for a guy
so you own St. Elmo's already. So that's already going on in your background.
I had bought St. Elmo in 86. And it did go into the background. And in the meantime, I took that little piece of junk from $3 million to 20-some million dollars in sales and tripled the size, more than tripled the size. But Steak and Shake home office was just about 2 blocks away, and I was able to really do both. At night, I worked at overseeing Elmo, as well as on the phone at the daytime. And I ran Steak and Shakes, about 300 stores that time, located all over the Midwest and down through Texas. And that was a good company at the time. I ended up moving it from NASDAQ to the New York Stock Exchange, and that was very, very profitable. And I shortly after that move retired from Steak and Shake and took my earnings, which were substantial. The value, I mean, that's when I say you get rewarded in stock. So you're in the same position as every other stockholder. And if you can make them rich, then you can certainly enjoy it with them. And that was my job to do, and came out well since that point in time. It's been sold. Another guy took it over, and things have not gone well for poor Steak and Shake. The reason being to pay the bill to take it over, I think, and this is, don't sue me because I'm not saying I know, but I think what they did was cheapen the product substantially, cut the labor down, paid less to people, so we got a lower class of people working there. Pretty soon the customer realized they were not getting the value they had always had. So it has not succeeded well in many markets.
So if you were advising them today, you'd say step up the food quality and let's pay the staff and get a higher skill set in there.
Yeah, if I bought the place, I'd certainly institute a hiring program, a training program, safety and sanitation standards, and I'd pump up the product. People forget price of something if it's a great price value. I mean, they remember the value. Is the value the taste? Is it the size? Is it the service? It's actually all of the above and even more. Location, and that wouldn't be too hard to change. Steak Shakes certainly could be brought back. In the meantime, a lot of competition has come in, Smash Burger, and just a lot of different ones that sort of imitate Steak and Shake's modus operandi. So it'll be a little tougher go this time. There is a lot of competition out there.
What was the name, Steve? I couldn't understand you when you talk your 130 pizza places that you took public.
Noble Romans.
Noble Roman. Okay. I was not aware of that. All these surprises in this relationship. You've been keeping a lot of things from me.
That's how I bought that Rolls from you.
And this one you took from 0 to 130. Was it your concept?
It was, I couldn't say it's all mine. I bought a failed Little Caesars, and I just expanded their failed Little Caesars into something somewhat different, and certainly different name, different marketing, lots of things. And I did use some of their, obviously it was an equipped restaurant, and we had people that knew the recipe. So we made one similar, not the same, but similar, and expanded from there. Did very well.
Beautiful. Now, I don't remember the reason I was in Sarasota. It may have been when I was going down to help out a friend of mine that I grew up with, and I was investing a little in his used car operation on Tamiami. I was coming down there a couple of nights a week. That may have been the reason, but I ended up having dinner at your house.
I remember, Jeff, and always glad to see you. In fact, you can come down for dinner anytime, including tonight.
Just tell me how much notice you need.
We won't be here tonight, but you can come down tonight, and I'll show you where all the fixings are.
Perfect. So that was, of course, the night that you introduced me to the sesame oil on the broccoli, hot sesame oil.
Hot chili oil, sesame oil. It was, Asian, and it was really good. I didn't like broccoli before either until you put enough oil on it that it kind of gave you some heat and some flavor. And now I use chili oil on lots of things. Asparagus.
Yep, and I always attribute that to you when I buy some of that. But that same night, we were in your beautiful home, I want to say in Longboat, and of course I knew you as an exotic car client, and we'd traveled to all these exotic car venues or collector car venues. And you said, Jeff, I'm very fortunate. I haven't always been a man of means. There was time early in my relationship with Lila when we actually had to sell our cars and lease cars to get started. Am I remembering that right?
That's quite correct, Jeff. I got a divorce. Unfortunately, we got married when I was 19 and to a really good lady, and we both went separate ways. She She went one way and I went the other in terms of the way we wanted to live. And so we divorced and did it amicably. And I gave her like the gold miner that splits with his partner. One guy got the gold, the other guy got the shaft. And I willingly took the shaft, I guess. But it kept my company together, though. I was able to keep it together and earn that money back. But I lived in a little condominium I'd rented, and it had no furniture, obviously. So I had a TV I bought, maybe at Costco or Sam's, and that on a cardboard box. That was the table. And so anyway, Lila and I were dating, and we sold the two cars we had and leased two other ones, so we get some capital to buy furniture. And that's a funny story, but it's true. We still have some of that furniture.
I love that story because I find that in my 30 some odd years in the car business and meeting all kinds of people and I tell the story of what they bought, et cetera. Once in a while, maybe the word is jealousy, or maybe the thought is they get all the luck, that some people think that it's always easy for everybody all the time. And on another interview or conversation I had with Charlie Woodsby the other day, who is the founder of Red Lobster, and he's the Charlie behind Charlie's Steakhouse and a few other themes. He'd let me know that prior to Red Lobster, that he'd actually in one restaurant went bankrupt, took on just to feed his kids a milk route, and got a bonus for signing up new people to the milk route, and was the top milkman. And they offered him a management or supervisor job, and he came home and told his wife about it. And she says, "Really, you want to be back in the restaurant business? Is that where your heart is?" And he went back in. Thank goodness. Your stories remind me of the same, that, and again, money isn't everything. Financially did fine, but it wasn't always easy street. I mean, when you were taking your paid for cars in to cash them out, to go take on a lease payment, to buy a little furniture at that moment, you didn't, I mean, I know you believed in yourself, but you didn't actually know it was going to turn out as nicely as it did you?
Well, that was my aim, but you can aim all you want to, but you don't always hit your aim. And we had cash flow. We just didn't have, I'd given away all the cash I had. I had flow, but I didn't have any reserves. So that's why I had to do that. But I've done over the years lots of things like that. I've remortgaged houses. I've got some farmland in Illinois. I've had to remortgage it a couple of times, and now it's all paid for. But just to survive when we had bad economic times. I mean, this country has not been a smooth ride any more than any country in the world. We've had times of recession. We've had near depression at times, unemployment, which means people aren't spending their money in our restaurants. We've had COVID for the last year, and I had COVID badly. So I can understand how that's spurred up the atmosphere of health in the country. So you just have to go over the punches. And one motto I've always had too, Jeff, is that cash is king, and we've always tried to have reserves. We haven't spent right up to the end of our limit. So we also have diversification. We're in lots of different things besides just restaurants. So because of that, we survived this last COVID thing, where I'll bet half the restaurants in the U.S., I don't know this to be a fact, but about that, 40 to 50% have shut down and will not reopen again. And I think over a long run, it may be 30% will be survivors and 70% are gone. And a lot of those ones that are gone are mom and pop operations, and even franchises that were mom and pop operations. Dad and mom bought a XYZ business and didn't have the cash backed up because they leveraged the hilt to buy it, and now they're closed. They just couldn't make payroll. And there's a lot of obligations in our business. I mean, you've got rent or mortgage payments. You've got to pay people that work for you. A restaurant can't open without a staff of, a pretty complete staff. You had cooks, dishwashers, bussers, waiters, waitresses, management. To open the door, you have to have all these people in place. You can't just open it up with mom and pa running the place. It's a lot more difficult and sophisticated than that. So it's an easy business to lose a lot of money in. It's an easy business. I shouldn't say it's easy. It's a business also. If you do it right, you can make a lot of money in.
Right. So that's really sad. The ones closed and all the families that depend. And of course, I know that you're not cavalier about COVID because you're 77 years old and you were in the hospital for over 100 days.
102 days. And darn near dead. On 2 occasions, they called Lila and said I was not going to make it. And I was intubated, and I got infections. I got kidney infections, lung infections, you name it. I had more bottles going into me than you can imagine, hanging from these little racks. And oh boy, I was totally out. They had me totally knocked out for about 42 days, and I'm glad they did. I don't think I could have stood all the external things that happened to me. That if I couldn't move in bed, I'm afraid I'd probably just go nuts. So I was out. They used paralytics on me to keep me quiet, and luckily Lila didn't let them pull the plug. And they told Lila I might well end up in a nursing home, unable to talk, unable to feed myself. Da 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 da. Da. So yeah, I was a pretty sick guy, and it's taken about 4 months now to come back. 5 months. I got out of the hospital in July, and here it is, the end of December, and I'm just now walking pretty well. And I could drive about 2 months ago, and of course luckily I could eat. I didn't lose my sense of smell or taste as many people do, and I was hungry, and put my 50 pounds that I lost in the hospital back on again in about 2 months. And now I'm working out with a trainer, and have been now for about a month and a half, 2 months, 3 days a week. And I've got a deep tissue massage lady that comes to the house 2 days a week, and she can hurt me pretty well, but it helps. I had a lot of stiff joints and lots of pain, and particularly in my neck and for back. She's done a good job on it.
Well, after not moving not moving much for a few months.
The best thing she did, she brought me a homemade apple pie last week. That was certainly part of the cure.
Well, I'm glad that you were only in an induced coma for 45 days and you didn't lose your taste or smell, because that would have really depressed you.
It would have.
I know.
I'm a foodie.
I know you're a foodie for sure.
And a wine connoisseur. I'm not a connoisseur. I mean, I'm not a wine snob. I normally just drink wine that would be $20 to $40 a bottle, and I make that bottle usually last 3 days or 4 days. But I enjoy my glass of wine at night. It's kind of a symbol that, well, the day's been good or been tough, whatever, and I'm finished with it now. Time to turn things off mentally. So it's symbolic. I have a good cigar about once a month too, and all my doctors say, "Oh, you should never touch a cigar." You know what? Most of those guys have a cigar too. I've been out with them socially, and we'll be boating or whatever, and they'll light up a cigar. So, a little bit of anything is okay. Now, I don't do narcotics or anything illegal, but I enjoy my wine. I enjoy a cigar maybe once every 4 or 5 weeks, and that's about it. I enjoy mostly my family and my wife. They're the true enjoyment of my life.
Ever since I've known you, without fail, your wife and kids come up. Lila and your kids. I mean, you continually mention them, and you continually mention how blessed you are with them and compliment them. And so, I mean, that's been there nonstop. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to Modena.
I'd like to go back too.
Yeah, okay. I know you like.
Unless you and I go back together, I think we can get into some big trouble there.
I think so. And
neat little restaurants and little wineries and all this stuff. We could just hang around there and become totally bums.
I know you've got the frequent flyer mile, so I may, let you, even though I got a 3.5-month-old daughter at home, I'll tell my wife, I'll be like, look, Steve.
Yeah, being a pilot though, on my in my own airplane, I didn't rack up the miles. I have my own miles. I just sold my airplane, but I sure love flying. A great part of my life.
And I remember you flying us a couple of places. I even remember, I know your latest plane that you just sold was the TBM, but I remember your Piper Meridian, which was a single turboprop. So it was a fast, right?
Right.
Really
good airplane. Right.
And I remember you dropped us off at the Clearwater Executive Airport, and you were really on the fence about doing it because did it have enough runway for that plane?
It was a little airport with no control tower and people on a weekend flying in and out of there using whatever runway they felt like. And I thought it was kind of dangerous, still do. I look back on that one and think, why did I ever do that? Because a mid-air collision is about as fatal as it can be.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't share with the passengers what you were thinking about to us, it was just like, hey, we're here. So
yeah. Well, you couldn't see the pucker on my touche.
No, I didn't. No, and you didn't get out of the plane, or you would have probably taken the seat with you. So when you went to Modena, you got a beautiful tour, and you saw a collection of some Schumacher race cars and race cars that Ferrari owners bought and I suppose leave there and then have the car transported. Ferrari delivers it to where they can use it on some track day.
You know, lots of money buys whatever you want. And those people had to be, I mean, it would make rich here seem small, but yeah, they bring it back to the factory. They go over the thing with the mechanics. They have it ready to go. They have their own track there too. They have a small private track that they test their new cars on, but these guys that own these older race cars, they can come in, suit up, and they can get their crew out of the factory and then go run to their heart's content. Then at events around the world, they fly these cars there. They have a pit crew for them, and they race. That's what I call rich. I mean, that is beyond rich.
Someday, Steve, you may make it.
I think it's a big deal to have one of my cars trucked to Indianapolis where my other house is, and that's $700.
Right.
Seems like a bargain.
Sheesh, can anyone do it for $650? And then you'd mentioned the souvenir shop at the Ferrari factory and a model of your California, like the California that you have.
Same color and everything.
How much money?
Just $7,000 on sale today for $7,000.
What size was it? What scale?
Oh, I don't know the scale number, but it was about a foot long, maybe 14 inches. It wasn't a tiny one, but it wasn't huge either. Couldn't pedal it around the living room.
Was it like amazingly intricate? Like if you open the hood and turn the back wheels, the cylinders would go up and down? I mean,
no, they had an engine in a jet, but it wasn't that intricate. You couldn't see the pistons move, but it was a beautiful piece.
$7,000 model in the Ferrari souvenir shop. Now,
maybe like in the car business, I should have said, I'll pay you $300 for it and start negotiating, but
I'm pretty sure that's the ratio of discount where you used to start me.
Oh, that's probably where I started, but with you, I never ended up there. I ended up more like at your price.
That's because I lost money on everyone, Steve. I always made it up in the volume.
That's right. That's the secret to any success. Lose money on every deal and make it up in the volume.
My dad taught me that one. So, of course, you're from Indianapolis, and an amazing racing heritage city. Your restaurant, St. Elmo Steakhouse there, very, very popular during races. And tell me about Ferrari trying to take your whole restaurant for the week.
They came in, and when Formula One came to Indiana, they came in and offered, I believe it was $500,000 to take over the whole place for a week. And that included us serving them and drinking all that, but we wouldn't do it. The reason being we had too many fans from around the world that brought their guests and wanted to eat at St. Elmo. We had a ton of prior reservations from a year ahead or more. And so what we did is we cut a deal for Ferrari to have their headquarters in the lower level, which is our wine cellar, and a beautiful place, by the way. So they had their drivers and they had the real VIPs from around the world come in and have lunch or dinner every day, and their drivers were there. And of course, they were world champions. So they got to meet Michael Schumacher and all of the crew. And we really enjoyed having them there. And they were there till the racing ended in Indianapolis. Now, Roger Penske, who bought the Indy 500 track, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, is going to try and bring back Formula One at some point in time. But I think that would be great. These people came with lots of money and lots of love for the United States. And they ate and drank and partied hard, much harder than our people do. Even for Super Bowl. I mean, they really know how to party. The private jets from Mexico and Canada and all over the world. I mean, the big jets were at the airport. And since my airplane was out there too, I was a midget among giants, but it was just fun to go out there and see these big birds. They were terrific.
I got to tell you, Steve, on F1, I mean, depending on where I'm standing, I could have difficulty watching it. If I'm just at a corner and my car comes around every few minutes. I was talking to Derek Bell on another show, and he admitted to me that driving's great. Watching, for example, Le Mans or one of these races where you're just at your turn and waiting for your car every 4.5 minutes doesn't excite him. But it sounds like it excites you because you've traveled to a lot of F1 races.
You know what they've done with the technology, though? They have these great big giant screens all over. And you can see the whole track on the giant screens. You don't have to just wait for your guy to flash by anymore. I'll still admit, though, watching the road races on TV is better. You have in-car cameras, which they do flash up, by the way, on the giant TVs at the tracks. But you've got commentators you can hear, and your wine cellar is only a few feet away. You can pour some good drink and sit back and just enjoy the race in a splendiferous way.
You told me the restaurant does $20 million a year in sales.
Little over.
A little over. So that's if there was 50 weeks, but I know there's 52 weeks, that would put you at about 400,000 a week anyway. I mean, really, they were just kind of hitting you at your average sales. So what could they have offered you to have you disappoint all of the race fans that come to town and count on going to the restaurant while they're in Indianapolis? At what number would you have been like, forget them, they can go eat somewhere else?
It would have been a matter of principle to me. We wouldn't have done that. Money is just a count. We have weeks we do $400,000 to $500,000, and then we have weeks we do more than $1 million a week. It depends on the event. Indianapolis, Indiana is located right in the center of the country. And we have NBA basketball. We have NFL. Peyton Manning, by the way, is a partner in a couple of our other restaurants. He was a quarterback for Indianapolis, Super Bowl winner. We have soccer. We have huge conventions in Indianapolis. So we get a lot of people from all over the country coming to Indy. It's the middle part of the U.S., easy to get to, cheap airfare. It's reasonably priced for anybody who wants to come and have a great time. It's a nice city.
Agree. I spent a little time there. Now, when you didn't close the restaurant, Ferrari did have a room. You did keep one set up, and I understand that you had some interesting other characters there that were dining that week. Herb, Panos, Honda.
Different week. That was just a separate event. And Herb Fischel, who used to be the director of racing for General Motors Corvette's Cadillac racing program, has become a good friend of mine, his wife Sandy, too, over the last 15 years. And Herb was kind enough to invite me to my own restaurant and said, I'm paying for it. He said, you're coming. But anyway, Mr. Honda was there at dinner, and Herb, of course, who's just a great storyteller about his racing careers, particularly in the old days of NASCAR, just had a great time. Don Panos, who owns the racetrack just southeast of Atlanta, was there. Don invented the transdermal patch and made a lot of money with that. And, Don was a smoker too, which is interesting. He kept smoking, so even though he had the transdermal patch. And the other funny part about Don's story is he couldn't get it passed by the FDA in the United States. So he went to, I think it was Ireland or England. Pretty sure it was Ireland though, and got it going in Europe. And then finally the FDA got around to passing it for sale in the States. But by that time he had a 3 or 4 year jump on everybody else to eventually competed with them and with the transdermal patch. So
what's in your garage now?
Well, I've got 2 garages, one in Indianapolis at my home there and one here. So right now in Sarasota, I've got a 2015 Ferrari California T, which is a convertible hardtop. It's got a hardtop that folds into the back. It's a beautiful medium blue with a cream interior, a really stunning automobile. And I just bought from a friend of mine, this has been 2 years ago, a pre-owned Ferrari 360 it had 38,000 miles on it. I'm sorry, 3,800 miles, not 1,000. And stick shift, red Ferrari, tan interior, red exterior. And I really love that car. It's got a mid-engine with a glass hood on the back of it right behind the driver. I know when I first drove the thing, I thought somebody was following me right behind me too close. And it was my own engine, of course. I mean, I knew that, but it just psychologically kind of screwed me up for a while until I got used to it. I've got a BMW Z8, a Z8, and that was one like it was a James Bond car. The specialty about this car, it's one of 62 ever made, bright red with a cream interior and stick shift and 5-liter V8 and all aluminum body. Really a great car. And then I bought my wife a used Rolls Royce. The dealer driven it for 3 years, and then it became available at about half the price it was new, so it became affordable. She's had that for about 8 years and loves it. And it's in immaculate condition. We only drive it about 3,000 miles a year tops, and it's serviced on time. And great car, should last your lifetime. And let's see, I've got my car I like to drive, and she does too, is the 2020 Bentley convertible, British racing green with a cream interior. And it's just a gorgeous car, really beautiful. It just drives like you're floating on a cloud, but it's still firm and fast.
Is that a
V8.
Continental?
Yeah, it's a Continental GTC.
Got it. Yeah.
They just call it the GTC now. They don't call it a Continental
Well,
anymore.
I'm sorry. It was always GTC. I just call that body Continental.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
I love
What
the
else?
color though. That British racing green with the cream is just drop dead gorgeous.
Yes. Is that everything?
In Indy, here's my favorite car. I've got a 2015 Corvette convertible, biggest engine you can get, 7-speed manual gearbox. It's a deep silver gray with a red interior. And that is my favorite car. I love that car. It's a convertible, top down on a spring or summer day. Fabulous. Bose stereo, car seats, you name it, it's got it. And it just goes like a bat out of Hades. Let's see, we have a 1998 Jaguar there, 4-door with 50,000 miles on it. Again, British racing green, cream interior, supercharged. I'll tell you a kind of a sad story, but before I went into the hospital with a surprise COVID visit, I'd ordered a Porsche Turbo Cayenne SUV, and it had to be shipped in from Denver. Dealer there had it, and it shipped to the local dealership, Tom Wood, and they put it in my garage, put a charger on it in Indy, and here I am in the hospital for months in Sarasota, and I didn't drive the thing for almost a year. So back for Thanksgiving, I got to drive it, and it was just it's pretty fast too. I really enjoy driving it, and it'll haul groceries to the luggage, whatever you want. Oh, I've got a Mercedes convertible there too, an S550 4-seater. Again, it's a dark metallic silver with a red interior. I seem to like that combination. I bought it pre-owned too, just on a whim one day. It was discounted about $70,000 from new, and it had 2,700 miles on it. So I bought it, took it back to Indy. That's it.
What do you think of the new Vet?
I love the new Vets. They're technologically fabulous, and they seem to be a super good price value. You compare those with a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or one of the supercars made today, you're looking at 25% of the cost for a car that's 95% of the equipment and speed level. I don't have one ordered. I like to, whenever anybody makes a new model, I'd like them to make it about 2 years before I buy one. I had an 84 Corvette that caught on fire when it was brand new, and I learned from that lesson. They had a wiring issue, and they never did get it fixed. It kept catching on fire from time to time, and mostly smoke and no flames, but it was certainly inconvenient when that would happen on the highway.
There was ever a car that would make you not want to buy the first of a model, it would be the 84 Vet is a great example, even if it didn't catch fire.
The best.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'll shift gears, pick your brain a little bit. Steve, what would you say is your definition of success?
Well, having enough money not to worry about money. And I grew up worrying about money. They turned the electricity off at our house. They'd not deliver coal. In case you young people don't know what coal is, it's something we used to burn in a furnace before we had natural gas and oil. So I used to have to shovel the coal. But when you're on a oil and it's Indianapolis and it's 10 below, it gets a little cold in the house. So my early memories too, we had one bathroom and 12 people living in the house. If you had to go, you had to make an appointment. If you had an emergency, that's too bad. You'd probably have to clean up or go outside. Yeah, that's about it, Jeff.
Well, I mean, that probably had something to do with your motivation in your life.
It got me highly motivated not to go back to living in those circumstances. And people still do, obviously. I mean, things are what they are. After WW2, and it was just a rough economic time for everybody to restart the country's economy. And so families moved in together. My great-grandfather, great-grandmother, grandmother, grandfather, father back from the war, mother, then uncle, aunt, and their kids, and 2 dogs, one dog of mine, one dog of theirs, came to live with us in that one-bathroom house. And it was a little tough.
I mean, did you know it was tough at the time?
No, just normal at the time.
So at the moment, you weren't like, this is horrible, but looking back,
in retrospect, I mean, as I learned more and got exposed to more, and had friends that had more money and they led a better life and had nicer clothes, and Dad drove a nicer car. Although my dad, even though he didn't have much money from time to time, he always seemed to have a nice car. That was just like me. It was an inherited downfall for both of us to like cars.
Yes, cars have always been part of my memories with my dad. I don't know that since I was born that he struggled until maybe my early to mid-teens. He had a tough patch when we moved to Florida. The car mattered for sure, no doubt about it, and a lot of memories. So if you had to think, and if I'm catching you off guard, then you don't have to answer, but what do you think is the best advice that you've ever given someone?
Oh boy, that's a tough one, Jeff. Number one, I guess, is to eventually get yourself in a position where you work for yourself and not for somebody else who's your boss. And not everybody's cut out to be their own boss. I am, because I'm pretty disciplined and hopefully common sensed. A lot of people need the structure of an office, the structure of a big company. They just can't do it. I'm the opposite of that. I do a lot better when I have economic and social freedoms to do what I want to do. I work a lot harder when I'm working for me. When I work for me, it's not just me. I'm working for bankers. I'm working for my family. I'm working for employees. I call my employees, they're my business family. I mean, those people they have mortgages, they have car payments, they have kids are in college, so you've got to take care of them just like you would your own family. You don't want them to don't want to make a decision that causes them to lose their job. And over the years, we haven't fired too many people. We've tried to hire well. We test them. We kind of put them through the hoops with multiple interviews. And so as a result, we have very little turnover in our company. And I'm proud of that. That's real important, to choose right and then keep going. But don't outspend yourself, although I've certainly done that from time to time because I think I can make more money the next week and the next week, and I usually have. And so I always bought a good home, maybe a bit above my means at the time, and it kind of grew into it. I never put myself in a position where I knew I couldn't cover the cash flow. I have a motto: cash is king. Cash is king, and I mean that in my business and home too. If you run out of money, you're screwed. Can't pay somebody, you're just it's the beginning of your downfall. So cash is king.
What are you grateful for?
Everything in the world that I can see, touch, feel, and enjoy. First of all, I'm grateful for my wife and family. They're the best. And I'm grateful that I made enough money to really have a nice life. We don't live in opulence, we live in comfort. And that's very important to me, to be comfortable and not worried about the next day having to pay somebody.
It's one of the things I would say about you in my entire time interacting with you is when you said, hey, I'm grateful for anything I can see, touch, feel, my family. You continually comment, and this is true. I mean, you continually comment on whatever you're noticing, smelling, tasting, who you interacted with, your family, on a positive aspect. I mean, that's what you are. That's what you do. I don't know if that's a habit you chose, like, hey, I want to be like that someday because somebody influenced you, or that's just your genetics. I don't know, but you've always been like that in my experience with you.
I think my family's been like that too. And, I always think of myself that someday when you get old and your wife has passed and your kids live in other states miles away, and you have the most beautiful sunset happening that night you've ever seen. And you think to yourself, that is just gorgeous, but I have no one to share it with. And to me, sharing it with a family member, a friend, a spouse, that's much more than half of what you see, taste, feel. Just critical to my satisfaction is to share things with people.
What about something that nobody knows about you, or they'd be surprised to know about you?
I won't tell you about my harem, but I can't tell you because I don't have one.
Okay.
But Lila and I communicate about everything. And so there are no surprises. I do the same with my kids. I don't think they do it with me as much as I do it with them, but I communicate about everything that's on my mind or my plans or whatever, because I think they need to know, because someday they're going to be handling what were my plans and my dreams. They're going to be handling that and dividing it up or whatever. So I like to communicate about everything that I do with somebody.
You're making sure that they're set up, making sure that they're not blindsided, making sure they're thinking about it. Could there be anything left on Stephen Huse' bucket list, who's been all over the world, been to all the races, been to the manufacturers, to the auctions, to the events, has all the cars, eaten everything, died a couple times, came back? What could be on your bucket list?
Coming back again if it ever happens. I don't have a bucket list anymore. I mean, I am as pleased as I can be with the way things have gone. There have been so many people, by the way, when I got this COVID and I almost died, I was just amazed how many people called, wrote, emailed Lila, and later when I was conscious myself, that showed true love. Doctor, even internal medicine guy, Dr. Adamaki, who's here in Sarasota, I just remarked to him one day, I'm getting awful tired of this hospital food. So he bought me dinner at a restaurant, brought it in, and he sat there and cut up my baked chicken and my vegetables so I could handle them. And brought time before when I was in the hospital with a new knee, he brought me a bottle of wine when I had to stay overnight. I mean, people like that do little things. They're not little to me; they're pretty big.
Did I tell you a couple of years ago when a doctor gave me about 6 weeks to live?
No, that long, huh? Tell me about it.
I told him I couldn't pay the bill, so he gave me another 6 weeks.
Good.
Steve, I appreciate your generosity. I called some old friends out of the woodwork. I know I haven't done everything in the world to maintain relationships. I'm not checking in every week. And some wonderful people like you said, hey, if you're doing a show, let's do one. That warms my heart, really makes me feel cared about. And I appreciate you putting yourself out there and helping me with this project. I hope the audience enjoys it.
Glad to do it, Jeff. You're a guy I admire. You've been through the fire yourself, and you've done well, and you've made your life. You've taken care of a young man, your son, that's got some disabilities, and you've included him in everything you do, which I certainly admire. Now you have a new baby too, and a wife that's a sweetheart. So you've chosen well to make your own happiness.
Well, of course, at my age, having a baby, some people look at you funny, but someone put it perfectly for me and helped me put it all together for myself. And they said, if you're not a father, what are you? And that suits me fine. I mean, that's my favorite thing. Steve, thank you. Love you, brother.
Bye, Jeff. Right. Okay, love you too.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.